Hi, thanks for taking a minute to watch this. I'm Phil Hunter, the pastor of Citrus Grove Church in Wesley Chapel, Florida, and I'm here at Pinecrest Academy, Highway 54 between Wesley Chapel and Zephyr Hills, and you can join me here on Sundays at 9:30. I'll reach out in the parking lot, show you the way in, get you acclimated here, and you can worship the Lord together with us. I invite you to do that anytime you're in Wesley Chapel. For now, you're probably not here this weekend, that's why you're watching this. Let me turn your attention to the sermon that we're going to focus on today. I'll preach on this one at our service here. I'll kind of give you the highlights of it as you follow along in Luke chapter 7. We've reached chapter 7, and we're just going to keep working our way through Luke here through the summer. Going kind of line by line, verse by verse through this gospel biography book of what Jesus was doing and teaching while he was walking around on earth. And so we've moved from chapter 6, which is Jesus talking in a long sermon called the Sermon on the Plain. And now the plain is in flat land. And I realize that might sound like he was on a plane. Chapter 7 is kind of the end of that. And off he goes to meet some people, do a couple of visits. If you watched last week's video or were here in person, you knew that Jesus was acting like this expert doctor, running all the right tests, which is such a big part of what doctors do. What's in your heart? What's under your feet is your foundation. This week, though, we're going to flip it, and we get to test Dr. Jesus. Should you do that, though? Test God? Should you push Jesus? Should he check his limits? I hope that at first glance you'd say no. That'd be your gut instinct. Maybe you'd quote a verse like, you should not put the Lord your God to the test, Deuteronomy 6, and Jesus quotes that verse too. Good, fair enough. Don't invent silly tests to decide if God is really God. Don't do that. Don't be foolish and dare him to protect you while you're doing crazy stuff. Don't do that. But in other places, God does tell you to test him. In so many words, test me, like in Malachi 3. Or even back in Luke chapter 6, where God said, give, and a generous measure will be given back to you. You could also say in any verse where God is making a promise to you, he's calling on you to evaluate what he's saying. Is this good enough for you? Is he good for what he's saying? Is he reliable? Is he faithful? You tell him. Test him. Try it out. Put him through the test, because he is faithful. And on the other side of what he promised you, you will see that what he said is true. He's confident letting you test him on things because he knows he passes the test. We don't call that testing God usually. We call that trusting God. So today's tests that you're running on the limits of Jesus' power, they're really nudges to trust the great extent of Jesus' ability to help and to heal. Listen to these two visits that Jesus makes in Luke 7, 1-17. When Jesus had finished saying all of this in chapter 6 to the people who were listening, he entered Capernaum, his hometown at the very top of the top lake of Israel. Then there a centurion's servant, whom his master valued highly, was sick and about to die. This is a Roman soldier, by the way, the invading force. The centurion heard of Jesus and sent some elders of the Jews to him, asking him to come and heal his servant. When they came to Jesus, they pleaded earnestly with him, "This man deserves to have you do this because he loves our nation and has built our synagogue." So Jesus went with them. He was not far from the house when the centurion sent friends to say to him, "Lord, don't trouble yourself, for I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. That is why I did not even consider myself worthy to come to you. But say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes, and that one, come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it." And when Jesus heard this, he was amazed at him. And turning to the crowd following him, he said, "I tell you, I have not found such great faith, even in Israel." Then the men who had been sent returned to his house and found the servant well. He's healed. He's healthy. Verse 11, soon afterward, Jesus went to a town called Nain. Some translations say it's the same day. Some manuscripts of the Bible say maybe it was just the next day that Jesus was over in the next town, this little village of Nain on the border of Galilee and Samaria. And his disciples and a large crowd went along with him. As he approached the town gate, a dead person was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. And a large crowd from the town was with her. When the Lord saw her, that's Jesus, when he saw her, his heart went out to her, and he said, "Don't cry." Then he went up and touched the bier they were carrying him on, the casket, the platform they were carrying, and the bearers stood still. He said, "Young man, I say to you, get up." And the dead man sat up and began to talk. Jesus gave him back to his mother, and they were all filled with awe and praised God. "A great prophet has appeared among us," they said. "God has come to help his people." And this news about Jesus spread throughout Judea and the surrounding country. So that's through verse 17. And what do you take away from it? Well, be brave and dare to ask a question of God like, how powerful are you really? That was kind of the astounded question that everyone was asking at the end of this chapter. And it was also making them think, could he even do... And you can fill in the blank with the most amazing, impossible feats of skill and of mercy that you can imagine. Could this Jesus even do this for me? Do this for my family? Do this for my neighbor? Even asking you asking that question leaves you in kind of this zone where you're saying, this is so far out there. I could never do that. But I'm curious. Maybe Jesus could, now that I've seen him do this. And even leave aside whether he will do that. That's another question. Whether in his wisdom he decides that, yes, he will. Just, Lord, knowing that you can is comforting to me. Because if you are able to do it, and you decide not to, it must not have been in your best plan for me, or for my friend or my family member. I take that on faith, but I need constant reminding that you can do far beyond what I can ask or imagine. I and you listening do need our boat rocked occasionally, just so that we don't get shy with God, so that we don't get defeatist, that he will never do this for me. And so that I do ask, and I seek, and I knock, and I approach God's throne of grace with confidence and find mercy to help me in my time of need. I don't want it said of me that I have not asked, that I have not because I have asked not. Well, Lord, make me brave to ask. That's a good prayer for you to pray. I think looking at these two visits that Jesus makes in Luke 7 do make us brave to ask God for anything. Now, examine what Jesus proves here to his followers then and now. What do we learn about his power here? The first thing is about distance. How close or far away is Dr. Jesus from the patient that he's working on? Take that centurion servant who is far away, out of sight, in a house somewhere in town, while Jesus has only just walked inside the city limits. So there is no body in front of him to work with. There's no chance of using your hands. There's no ability to give him medicine or work some kind of a trick. Think about that. The servant lying in bed or wherever he is, sitting in this house, never even sees the person who healed him, Jesus. The centurion never even sees the person that he's asking for help. This is all handled over conversations, secondhand conversations through the village elders, through some good friends, running messages back and forth with Jesus. And if the test is, can you even heal a body from a distance? Is it true that you don't, Jesus, need to be right up next to it, touching it? The answer is clearly yes. Jesus passes that test. He heals from afar. Distance is not actually an issue for him. So that shows the limits, the extent, really, of his power. And so you, too, be brave and ask your God, who you cannot see, to see you and see your need and use his power to solve your problems and bail you out and heal you and forgive you and support you and strengthen you. He can keep every promise he's made to you, all without you ever laying eyes on him. You don't actually need to walk by sight, even if you would prefer to. You walk by faith, but not blind faith. Just trust that this person that I can't see does have the power to help me out, even from far over the horizon. I'll see you before too long, but you're still over the horizon. I can't yet. Jesus is proving to his followers who are going to need to know this before too long, their doctor of body and soul is going to ascend into heaven, and he's not going to be visible to them anymore like they're used to. But they need to know that he can still act, he can still heal from afar. God can do that. And the distance, it turns out, between your lips and God's ears isn't nearly as far as you think, or as far as the devil would have you believe. Jesus passes this test, so take him up on it. Trust him on it. But let's stick with this theme of distance for a second, because the flip side of being far away is, well, maybe Jesus wouldn't want to get close up to a mess like this, a mess like me, or the trouble this person got into. Maybe it's just too much. And Jesus, you picture him being pure and holy, and maybe in a beautiful church. Maybe he doesn't want to get all, covered in whatever else we've got. You start to wonder if this holy divine being might not want to get his hands dirty. So the test you can put to Dr. Jesus is, are you willing, Dr. Jesus, to get right up close and personal with this mess? To be face to face with the reality of sin and of awfulness, the kind of gross stuff that I have to deal with every day? And the answer is right here in Luke chapter 7, verse 14. He touches the coffin. Jesus has been face to face with the worst, hardest, ugliest parts of our human experience. And he walks right up to a dead body and touches it. And in verse 13, when he tells the mom, don't cry, this isn't Jesus papering over her suffering. He's saying he's got a solution for her. Her son is going to be alive again in just a minute. Now, culturally, religiously, nobody in Israel would dare touch a dead body, would dare touch a casket. God commanded them not to touch a dead body, and they would be ceremonially unclean for a week if they did, unable to go in to worship at church, required to go through a couple of ceremonial washings on day 3 and 7, or risk being kicked out of their nation. But to save a life and to show love, Jesus would get right up close to what is gross and what is disturbing and ugly, and that's just the start. He is going to go so far beyond touching a dead body. He's going to go so far beyond being face to face with suffering. He's going to experience hell like no other person has ever gone through. He's not only touched a corpse, he became a corpse himself, so that when you die, your soul will go right on living. And he's such a good doctor that he will even restore and glorify your body before too long as well. Now, Jesus passes this test. He got close. It's not like Jesus is far away from you right now either, right? Sure, you can't see him, but he's very near. He said he's with you always. His kingdom is within you. He and his Spirit come and make their home in your heart. He's near to you. Jesus is not afraid to get up close and personal with your mess. Lastly, just think about authority here. The widow of Nain had no authority in her culture. When the last male in her family died, it was like losing her pension and her Social Security and her Medicare all on the same day. She was going to be dependent on the generosity of other people. She was going to be at the very lowest rung of the status ladder for sure. So put Jesus to the test. How does he treat people who have absolutely no power over what's happening in their lives? What does it say? When the Lord saw her, his heart went out to her. Jesus is in charge of everything, but he stopped everything he was doing so that he could walk up to this woman on this day, going through one of the worst moments of her life, and so that he could give her comfort, so that he could show her that her son's death was not the end. He wanted to reunite her with her child, just like he can do for parents and children in heaven. Jesus wanted to show her the extreme lengths of his power and of his compassion for her. But in the earlier verses, the authority situation was different. The main character is this centurion who lives by this power structure of the military. He expects respect and obedience in his job from those under his command. But even he understands he's not the top dog. He's got 100 soldiers under him, but there are a lot more than 100 soldiers in the Roman army. He's got some colonels and some generals over him, and that's life. Being a tough guy, a relatively powerful guy, didn't give this man any delusions. He's still reached the limits of his own power. And some problems are just too big for him to fix. Some decisions were just not his to make, just like some aren't yours. But when you bump into those problems that you cannot fix and you have no authority here, he sought out the Lord. This centurion sought out the Lord, and I'm talking about the Lord, all capital letters, the true God. He learned about him, heard about him, converted to faith in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, years before he even knew about Jesus. He trusted that the true God was the ultimate authority, and he was right. But now he's met Jesus. He's heard about this Jesus, and from what he's heard, Jesus is passing all the tests. He's the doctor that his servant needs right now. And the centurion tests the limits of Jesus' power, trusting that the Almighty God would be powerful enough to heal from across the street just as well as from inside his messy house. He trusts, and Dr. Jesus passes the test. This week, ask God bravely for whatever is on your mind. Hold the Lord to the promises that he has specifically made to you, and just watch God work. Watch him push the limits to the extremes. Watch him help. Watch him heal. Jesus will pass any test. So trust him. Amen. The peace of God, which passes all understanding, guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Take care. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.